Want to know why? Ask how. Herod the Humongous.
The Israeli election has been settled. Benjamin Netanyahu has won against one of the toughest challengers Netanyahu has ever faced, former Israeli head of the army Benny Gantz, who almost tied Netanyahu. But don't let the finality of that outcome fool you. The consequences of this election could produce an earthquake in the Middle East. First, to understand those consequences, it's important to see where the election stands right now. As of April 12th, Benjamin Netanyahu was only one parliamentary seat ahead of his rival, Benny Gantz. Netanyahu leads by 36 parliamentary seats to Gantz's 35. That is a real squeaker. Yet Benjamin Netanyahu called this a tremendous, tremendous victory. Why? Because the popular vote is not enough to win you the prime ministership in Israel. You have to organize a coalition with a majority in the Knesset, Israel's parliament. And days before the full vote could be counted, a bloc of right-wing parties swung its weight behind Netanyahu, sealing the victory. Which means that Netanyahu can organize a majority and his opponent, Benny Gantz, cannot. But there are two issues on the table far more important than the battle between Israel's Netanyahu and Gantz. Netanyahu made a Middle East shaking deal with the far-right parties who have just put him over the finish line. The Israeli newspaper Haaretz calls it annexation in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Here's how it works. Netanyahu has been accused of accepting $280,000 in gifts, cigars, pink champagne, and jewelry. And he's been accused of giving favors in exchange. Now he's worked out a new exchange to get protection from upcoming indictments on charges of bribery. Netanyahu has promised the right-wing parties that he will make all of the so-called illegal settlements in the West Bank a part of Israel. This means annexing a swatch of land called Area C, part of the territory that would have been offered to the Palestinians in a two-state solution. But it's crucial to remember three things. The Palestinians have been given land before and have never delivered peace. Israel gave up Gaza to the Palestinians, and those Palestinians in Gaza have fired thousands of rockets at Israeli homes and cities ever since. A two-state solution is a land deal. It is not a peace deal. More important, all of the West Bank, all of that land that the Arabs call occupied, is part of biblical Israel. It has belonged to the Jews for 3,200 years. There is archaeological evidence that proves it. Meanwhile, the Muslim imperialist slaughter mill is the most successful imperialist machine in history. Within less than 100 years of the Prophet Muhammad's death, it conquered a territory 11 times the size of the conquests of Alexander the Great, 5 times the size of the Roman Empire, and 7 times the size of the United States. This is an imperialist conquest that makes the imperialism of Europe and the West look amateurish. In 637 AD, the conquering armies of Islam seized the homeland of the Jews, wiped out 40 Jewish cities, then turned colonialistic. The Muslims sent Arab tribes from Saudi Arabia to occupy Israel. Yet some Jews managed to hang in there and to continue to live in an Israel illegally occupied by Muslims. So who are the real occupiers of this so-called occupied land? I leave that up to you. Then there's issue number 3. The Trump administration says it has been working on the deal of the century, a peace deal for Israel and the Arabs. The Palestinians have refused to participate in any Trump deal. But the real issue is not between the Israelis and the Palestinians. It's between Israelis and the Arab nations that surround it. Those Arab nations occupy a land 3 times the size of the United States. Almost all of the Arab nations have been dedicated to Israel's destruction since the Jewish state was reinstated in its original homeland in 1948. If Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu can bring Arab states like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait to declare peace with Israel, that would utterly rewrite the power equation in the Middle East. It would allow Israel to work above board with the Saudis and their Arab allies, with whom Israel has been working secretly for a while now. What would Israel and its former Arab enemies work together on? Opposing the nation that has vowed to slit the throats of the Saudi royal family. the nation that has sworn to pull off regime change in Egypt. That common enemy is Iran. Iran has already taken over Iraq. Iran is working to take over Lebanon. Iran is increasing its power in Syria. And Iran is fighting to take over Yemen. In other words, Iran is trying to take over the entire Middle East, and Iran is one of the key members of Vladimir Putin's axis of evil. But there's more. President Trump was right to declare the Iranian army terrorist. Iran is dedicated by its constitution and by its founding father, the late Ayatollah Khomeini, to bringing Iranian-style Islamic revolutions first to all 57 Islamic nations, then to what the Ayatollah called the barbarian West. Iran's constitution dedicates its army to a holy war against the Europeans and the Americans, peoples who the Ayatollah said must be struck with an iron fist. Yes, the ultimate goal of the Iranian army, according to Iran's constitution, is to put the USA under Iranian-style Sharia law, even if it means slaughtering all of Americans' unbelievers. Slaughtering you and me. As the Ayatollah Khomeini, Iran's George Washington and Thomas Jefferson rolled into one, put it, quote, Muslims have no alternative to an armed holy war against profane governments. That means secular governments, but back to the words of the Ayatollah. Holy war, the Ayatollah says, means the conquest of all non-Muslim territories. It will be the duty of every able-bodied adult male to volunteer for this war of conquest, the final aim of which is to put Quranic law in power from one end of the earth to the other. All other wars of conquest are unjust and tyrannical and disregard the moral and civilizing principles of Islam. That's one reason why Iran has been working for roughly 30 years with its partner North Korea on intercontinental ballistic missiles tipped with nuclear warheads. Benjamin Netanyahu is dedicated to protecting us, to protecting Western civilization against the Iranian menace, along with a man I normally loathe and detest, Donald Trump. So there's more to the Israeli election than meets the eye. This is Howard the Humongous, speaking to you from the future. It's your job and my job to make, or, want to know why? Ask how. And now for the sleazy, slimy, slithy, tovey, little, off button.